Okay, I'll cock that shutter. This went flat. I've just cocked the shutter. I'll put the retard gear train in position and fit the retaining screws. This screw serves as a pivot. The screw at the other end here, that's where the adjustment is made. There's not a lot of adjustment, but it's certainly enough. Let's try it there. Well, that was a pretty short second, so I might need to shift that adjustment slightly. That's somewhere in the right direction. Right, the self timer, that needs to go in. That has held in place with a single screw. And let's see how the shutter behaves if we cock it. Set the self timer, release it, the self timer is running down. And the shutter fires. Okay, that sounds like that's running quite well. I will give that an extra good blowout because I'd used graphite powder to lubricate the speed trains, and I don't want any of that floating around causing me grief. This cam goes in here. This is the cam that comes, the shaft comes through from the back, and this actually cocks the main cam. What else have we got here? Right, so I want to put my speed settings cam plate on the front. So I'm lubricating the surfaces that contact here with some molybdenum paste. Put that in place. Put the retainer ring on the front, and I'm going to go away and check this on my shutter timer and see how close we are. I can check before we get there actually to see what the eighth of a second is the speed that it's easiest to judge what the shutter's running like. That's not running on straight. Okay, so I need a tool to cock this shutter, don't I? Here, this one. Set this to an 8, which is there, and I need this to release the shutter. Well, that's too fast. So I'll move that retard gear train in slightly for greater engagement with the main cam, and that will slow the shutter down slightly. Cock this, loosen the screw off slightly, move that speed train in slightly. No, it's not going to move in any further than that. So I've got that in as far as it'll go. That's not the only way to adjust speeds. Shutter speeds are all good. So let's put these rings in place. Now the aperture control ring has a little notch in the bottom, must couple with that tab on that lever. The shutter speed plate has a little notch in it, couples to a little tab that sticks up on that shutter speed settings cam plate there. Just checking the other one stayed where it was put. No, it didn't. It's popped out of place. Move that plate around. That's better. That's on there. That's on there. Right, that's sitting correctly. And my shutter speed settings ring here goes on. Has two notches. One that sits over this little detent here for our shutter speed detent clicks, and one that sits over the same tab as that other one. Right, well that's sitting there now. That needs the front plate on there, so I can take this retaining ring off. And this piece needs a wipe of molybdenum paste or graphite grease or similar over those detents. This only goes on in one position. There's a little hole in the front of this and it fits over that post. Why is this sitting skewer? That looks right. That sits on there like that. Get our retaining ring in place. Check that it's not too stiff. It seems a little bit clicky to me. Let's just take it back one. Yeah, I think that'll do. And put the lock screw in position. Right, that shutter's now ready to have the lenses put back in it and then put back on the camera body. I'll start by cleaning up the middle group. First I want to remove that old grease. This is tricky because you're trying not to get any solvent or grease on the glass while you're removing this old grease from the internal thread. That's graphite grease. Graphite grease is particularly hard to see the back of. That graphite is just, it gets ingrained into the metals. The reason I'm removing this grease is because, not because the grease is useless, it's because it will have gathered up dust over time, and so it becomes a very effective grinding paste rather than a lubricant. And before I clean the glass, it's important to see the back of all traces of grease that are around the place, because otherwise if they get on the glass cleaner is not particularly efficient at removing grease. Okay, so that looks quite good. Now let me have a go at the glass. I'll use glass cleaner for this. I'll do the internal surface here first. This is the surface that faces the shutter blades. And although it's concave, it's fairly shallow and I can see the reflections of light from the window, so I'm able to judge how clean I've got that. Now I'll clean the front surface. This is greasy because of the grease from that helical thread. It's improved, it's nearly right. The glass cleaner I'm using here is just normal domestic glass cleaner, there's nothing magical about it. Alright, that looks good to me. That can be screwed into the front of the shutter. And that needs to be done up somewhat more than finger tight, otherwise you'll end up with problems. So I'm going to use that tool I used previously. Blow off any dust and inspect that again. Now I'll just wipe that front surface again. Sometimes when you've got the dark shutter behind it, you can see smears, marks that you couldn't otherwise see. Oh, that's good. Right, the rear group, I'll do that now. That's this one. And basically it's a rerun because all I'm doing is much the same thing. I'm going to use some naphtha to clean the whole mount to remove any traces of oil. And we know that the back of the shutter was quite oily because there was plenty of oil on the diaphragm blades. Now I'll clean the glass with glass cleaner. And at least this surface is just about flat, so I can see by reflected light how clean I've got this. I'll be able to see smudges or smears on here much easier with the reflected light from the window coming in from my side. It looks pretty good, and I'll put that in place and then clean the outside surface. And this only needs to be finger tight or not much more, so I'm just doing that up exactly like that. I could put a rule across here and use that as a spanner. That would certainly work because the lens glass is down below that notch. So it's not like I'd be in danger of touching it. That looks very good. That only leaves the front group to be done. And here, at least the grease is on the outside. It's not on the inside, so I can get to it without getting too close to the glass. You can see it was graphite grease, and I want all of that off. There was no special need to use graphite grease in a spot like that. It's not an area that you need absolutely minimal friction. With your focus adjustment, you do not want it to be particularly loose, particularly with a viewfinder camera. With a rangefinder camera, you need to be able to change the focus while you're holding the camera to your eye. And there's an argument for the focus to be nice and easy to move. But with a viewfinder camera, you hold the camera down, you look at the camera, you set the focus, and then you put the camera to your eye to take the photo. You do not want the focus being too easy to move, because there's always a chance that you'll disturb it while you're lifting the camera to your eye. So you don't want the focus too loose, too free moving on a viewfinder camera. A rangefinder camera, yes perhaps, but not a viewfinder camera. This is where you end up using lots and lots of cotton buds cleaning things, because sometimes you feel you're going round in circles. Just when you think you've got it completely clear, your last wipe across it sort of brings some smear to it. Okay, I think that's okay. I'll screw that into place. I'm not putting any grease at all on there yet. I'm still working on getting this glass clean. But this gives me a handy way of holding the lens where that glass surface that I've just cleaned is not liable to come in contact with anything dirty. Now the front surface here, that's very dirty, dusty, so I'll be cleaning that lightly with glass cleaner on both tips of that thing, and that's hopefully lifted off any dust or loose stuff. Now I'll give it the polish, if you like. Yeah, that's not a wonderful surface. It's clean, but the surface doesn't look wonderful. It's what you'd call cleaning marks. It's not great at all. It'll probably be fine for taking photos. It just doesn't bear very close inspection. Right, that looks good to me. I'll fit the lens back to the camera. The focus has to be set once everything's back on the camera. So I'll remove that front group, lubricate it and put it back at that point. I'll just clean these last remaining pieces so that they are ready to go. Here's our focus scale ring, and it's a little bit grimy. The retaining ring and that shim needs to be cleaned. And what have I got to achieve? I've got to get my flash connection back together. That's a bit odd. What's that got on it? It's something on there. It might be glue actually, that's got no purpose being there. Let me just try another solvent on that. Not even sure how you'd go about getting that on there. That's 2 shims, and I think someone's glued them together. Which is a crazy thing to do. I mean, it might make it easy for handling, but it's going to change the thickness. Alright, I'll work on getting these clean. So I've got them ready when I go to put the lens back on the camera. I've never seen anyone do that before. That's definitely what it is, and that's why there was what looked like a tiny smear of grease on the outside. It was because it was a smear of grease, a glue rather. Someone had glued this together. Okay, so I've got that wire soldered back. I need to achieve a couple of things here. I've got to get my shutter cocking action and the release popped into their sockets. I've also got to get these shims positioned correctly, and this should be possible. None of this is impossible stuff, it's just awkward. So I'll get this lot placed. And the challenge is just getting everything to fall into place. No, it's those shims are causing me grief there. Oh, did that do it? Let's find out. Yeah, we're in business. Okay, that all fell into place. Now if I open the back of the camera, I can get the retaining ring in place. And if I get the retaining ring in place and tighten that up, I am well down the path to success. That's just tight on the threads. There's nothing nothing binding up there. Yeah, it's just about done. Okay, right, well I'll reach in with my magic pliers and tighten that up. I didn't need to move that far. Okay, Right, so now I've got a camera that goes, and I'll need to just check the focus and get that correctly adjusted. I don't know what that speckle is on the front of that lens. I think that that's just a coating mark, is it? Yeah, it's gone. Can't have been anything permanent. Right, I'll check the focus, let you know when I'm done. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I need to put some grease on the threads of this lens. Now that lens thread there is very free, but doesn't have grease here to damp that movement. That would be too loose. That's better. That's a much better feel. Okay, well, I'll check the focus and then we'll put the focus scale ring back on. Well, I got the focus right. I've just put my focus scale ring back in there. Basically, I backed the screws completely off, so there was no friction there at all. Had my lens set to give me correct focus at infinity. Placed the focus scale ring in the camera up against the infinity stop. Made sure I didn't disturb the lens while I did that. Tightened the 3 screws. We're in business. So the camera is getting just about to the end stage. The only thing I want to check now is the point at which the shutter and the film release they should both release at the same time. If I release the shutter release very slowly, I'm listening to hear what clicks first. Well, the shutter clicked, but the film advance released at the same time, which is ideal. Okay, so that's all good. Last check, what about the self-timer? Yep, that's a goer. Alright, so there we have it. I think that's this camera dealt with, and this one can go back to its owner. And I'm sure he'll be very pleased to see it back. Thanks for watching.